לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר, בנותש יביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל המוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשם מראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבת בבית אדוני ליורך ימים.
A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kerachem aval banim, richam Adonai al yere'av. Ki hu yada yitzreinu zachor ki afar anachnu. Enosh kachatzir yamav ketzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz. Ki ruach avra bo ve'enenu. Velo yakirenu od mekomo. V'chesed Adonai me'olam ve'ad olam al yere'av. V'tzidkatko livnei vanim.
Psalm 121, Shalom Alois. Es eine Eloharim ayin yava Ezri, Ezri me'im adinoi oise shemayim v'aretz. Al yitin rabmoikra gracha al yonam shemracha, hine lo yanum lo v'lo yushan shem Yisrael. Adonai shemracha, Adonai tzilcha al yadim necha. Yemam shemesh le kekav erech b'loila. Adonai yishmarch m'kol ra yishmer samshecha. Adonai yishmer teischa v'yecha, me'yata v'yad elam. It is with great pain and difficulty for me to stand up here now, but I must be very honest how honored and privileged I feel to pay my last respects to Francis Neuman, a very, very special person, as I'm sure you all do know. Let me begin to introduce myself, and I'll explain to you why. My name is Rabbi Mangel, and I am the Chabad Rabbi in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And the reason why it's important for me to introduce myself to you is not because when I leave anybody is going to want to know who I am, but for 20 years now, Frances and I have been having a debate. And at her final moments, she wins. For 20 years, I've been living in South Jersey for 25 years, and everyone in our community calls me Mendy, besides one person. Francis Neuman refuses to call me Mendy. Rabbi Mendy is your name. And how many times we've argued and debated the subject. To her, though I was young enough to be younger than her younger child, to her, you earned the title Rabbi, and as she used to say, Sinish derech eretz, it's not respectful for me to call you anything other than Rabbi Mendy. So Francis, it's Rabbi Mendy here for today. Mi ani umani, I don't know what deserves, what right I have to give the hesped, to give a eulogy for someone as significant as Francis Neuman. We're here to say goodbye to the body, but not to the soul of Francis Neuman, Zissel Fredel Bas Mordechai Viliba, who had an incredible life. He didn't start off that wonderful, as many of you know. She began a young child in Poland, living under very difficult circumstances. Her father and her mother worked very hard. Her father ran a kosher butcher shop, and that is an important detail of their story, because when the Nazis forbid Jews to open their store, Mordechai refused to close his store, because for him, he knew that if he did shut his store, there will be no kosher meat for the Jews to eat. And he sacrificed and ultimately gave up his life to allow the Yidden of that shtetl to have kosher meat. He was taken by the Nazis, and the family never ever saw him again. His wife, Liba, was focused on one thing more than anything else: to make sure that her 4 children, her son and her 3 daughters, will survive. But there was a purpose in her forcing and fighting with them to make sure that they leave her and run away to safety, while they all wanted to stay with her. And I've heard this from her so many times, how the children wanted to stay with their mother because they didn't want to run away or leave their mother behind. But for her, for their mother, it was important. As Francis would always say, their mother would say, you have to live because it's important for the rest of the world to know what we lived through. It was important for Francis that the rest of the world know what she lived through. And I can tell you that for Francis, the story of her survival and the story of keeping her mother and her father's memories alive wasn't just a physical survival. She told this to me many times. They want us to tell the story, wie wir gehargert geworden, wie Jiden, how we died and were brutally murdered as Jews. But I want, Francis would tell me, as they sollen wissen, that they, the next generation, should know, wie wir gelebt, wie Jiden, how we lived as Jewish people. It was important for her children, for her grandchildren, for my children, for my family, for my community, to know the story of her survival wasn't just a physical survival, but Am Yisrael Chai, the commitment of Klal Yisrael. Francis treated me with tremendous respect, what I didn't deserve or earn. But for her, the shul represented what was taken away from her in her youth, a vibrant Yiddishkeit, a beautiful community. And she bestowed upon us and upon the shul her chesed, her kindness, to make sure that the children's study she would compliment and praise and be active and involved and invested in making sure that there's a brighter and a better and a stronger Jewish tomorrow. She lived for that. In 2016, our shul asked her to be the honoree at our dinner, our annual dinner. And as anybody who knew her knew that her immediate reaction was going to be absolutely not. And there were 2 reasons why she would give the excuse as to absolutely not. One was true, and one was absolutely not true. The not true part was, I'm not deserving of it. And anyone who knew her in our community, and I'm sure anyone who knew her from when she lived here, knew that she was absolutely deserving of it. And it was almost shameful in our shul that we waited until 2016 to honor her. But she really felt that I'm just a regular person doing my job. Far from it. But the real and true reason why she didn't want to accept it was because by her nature, she was a Hatzneleches, a modest and a private person. She did so much for so many. She cared for everybody that she came in contact with, but in a private, stille Gehet, as she used to say. In a private way, no one needs to know. Don't make a scene out of her. But ultimately, she accepted. And the reason why she accepted is because I begged her, not just because it's important for our shul, because Phil and Libby, you'll remember what she told me then. She says, I will give you the donation that the honorees give, but don't honor me. She was going to pay her way out of the honor. But I begged her. For years she's been telling me that her mother, Liba, told her that you have to live to be able to tell the next generation the story. And here you'll have a platform in public to tell your story. And rather than at the dinner talking about herself or her children, or about her husband, she spoke about the life of where she came from. So everyone in the room should understand the journey of a difficult past to a beautiful, beautiful present, and hopefully a more exciting future. For her, life in the beginning wasn't easy. After the war, she met up with her siblings, and Baruch Hashem, with the help of the Jewish Family Service and this beautiful community of Cleveland, Ohio, they moved here. And she began her life. She began her life, she continued on in public school, and if I remember correctly, she went to beauty school. Am I right on that? To become a beautician. I think it so fit her because she was beautiful inside. I'm sure she was beautiful outside, but for her it was important to make and bring out the beauty of everybody. And that was the career that she began. She was a real believer in education, as her mother was, ahead of her time, believing that girls should be educated. I remember her telling me that all the time, that girls should be educated. I had 5 daughters, and Frances always asked me about my daughters. She took great pride in my son when he became a rabbi, but for her, the fact that my daughters are educated and going to seminary and to school and graduating from college was something that she took great pride in. And Frances finally started to see happy times in her life. She dated a young man whose name was Neuman, who took great pride in showing her off. And I remember her telling me the story, and I remember both of you actually telling me the story as well, that one time this young man, I believe his name was Martin Neuman, was dating her. And Martin was very proud of this young, beautiful woman that he was dating. And I'm going to digress for a moment and tell you about that. You know, for the last few weeks, Frances was in a very, very difficult touch-and-go setting. And over, I was hearing from the family, you know, that the hospice nurse is saying, it's almost here. And I would come to the home and she would still be strong. And the nurse would tell me she's waiting, she's fighting, she's waiting to hold on to something. And there was different guessing as to what she was holding on to. Someone suggesting that she wanted to be as she is, that her Aliyas and Neshama Shol should leave her the same week as her beloved husband, whose yahrzeit is just in a few days from now. But I believe that there's a different reason. Because in the Torah portion that we read, in the day that she passed, the Torah talks about a story that's found nowhere else in the entire Chumash. A love story that when a young man meets a woman and they fall in love right there, right then. And I believe that that was a monumental part of Frances's life in how she met her beloved Stanley. So she was dating this young man, Martin, who came to show her off to her cousin who just came off the boat, also a survivor named Stanley. And what Martin didn't know is that when he was trying to rah-rah-rah to showcase how, look at my beautiful girlfriend, Stanley and Frances fell in love, soon to be married, soon to have 2 wonderful, wonderful children that gave them and continued to give them so much nachas. And I want to make a point about that to Phil and to Libby. There are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. 10 commandments in the Torah, in the Aseret HaDibros, 10 commandments that God gave us on Mount Sinai. of all 613, less than a handful of them does the Torah tell us the reward for those mitzvahs. But what you have exhibited in that commandment of kabed es avicha ve'es imecha, the honor that you bestowed upon your mother, the attention, the affection, the care that you've showed your mother in the last many weeks and the years before that, is legendary. It is something that humbled me to watch two youngsters respecting their mother's wishes in difficult settings. I would call you and text you and say, can I come over and see your mother? And your answer was no, and then an hour later the answer was yes. And what changed? You didn't want your mother to be seen in a way that wasn't dignified. And you went through great pain to make sure that when anyone saw her, she looked up and standing and strong. And you have shown tremendous, tremendous kibbud of aim, tremendous respect to her, not just in the last 6 to 8 weeks, but over the last so many years since you were born. And the Torah promises, V'arachta yamecha, you will be blessed with long life. Continue on that, keeping her memory alive, keeping her blessings alive. Francis and Stanley began a beautiful life together. First it was difficult, and eventually life picked up. And for my great blessing, they moved from Cleveland, but they moved to New Jersey. And in the beginning they were in Central Jersey, and then they moved a little closer to South Jersey, where Stanley won the award, I'm not sure if you know this, as Builder of the Year for the state of New Jersey. I'm not even sure what year that was, but I remember, long time ago. And then Baruch Hashem, Libby, because you moved to Cherry Hill, they came to visit, and that's how I got to know both Stanley and Francis 20 years ago. And again, together as a couple, their devotion, their commitment to Yiddishkeit, and their personal attention to me and my family was unbelievable. I cannot think of anybody else in our shul, and Libby and Phil, you know this, that I would leave on a Wednesday when I teach a class every Wednesday night to close to 75 people, to cancel my class to come, other than for Libby, for Francis, for all that she's done for our community and for our shul. And then eventually, Nebuch Stanley's life was taken, and Francis's life was never the same. For her, the loss of her beloved was difficult. And yet, she kept her head high, her dignity strong, and her composure always intact. Just think, for the last many weeks, she refused to let anybody know that she's sick. While most people like the attention and want to have the opportunity to say the goodbyes, for her, she didn't want anyone else to suffer, to be in pain, to feel hurt. Together, Stanley and Francis lived a beautiful Yiddish life. Their home, even Francis's home now in Voorhees, was decorated with beautiful Jewish mezuzahs and candelabras and kiddush cups and menorahs. They lived a beautiful life. But there's one thing that was important to Francis. For when she moved, it wasn't just her life and her children and her grandchildren and Baruch Hashem, her great-grandchild's life, but she lived the dream that her mother asked her in her parting words, that you have to live to tell them how we lived. So when she moved to South Jersey, she got involved in Jewish Holocaust Museum to teach, to talk, to go to schools, public schools, Jewish and non-Jewish, to impress upon them the importance of living and loving and caring and sharing and being. For her, it wasn't just talk, but as we say in Talmud, Dvarim Hayetzim min Halev, they were heartfelt, meaningful words that really inspired. And I want to read to you a note that she received, that she shared with me many years ago. She had a book of the thank you notes that different students and teachers would send to her. You still have it? You have it. But here's a public school non-Jewish child wrote to her. Thank you for inspiring me to be more, to reach out and share with the world. Your story helped me realize that you should not hate. Hate may be a small word, but it has lots of power. It means the world to me that you would struggle through your memories to help others. It wasn't easy for her to tell her story, but for her it was important to help others. King Solomon wrote a poem. I would like to read just some of those words. Who can find a wife of valor? Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come her way. She opens her mouth with wisdom and her tongue guides with kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-fearing woman is much to be praised. Please praise her for the fruits of her hands. Whenever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. I believe that when King Solomon wrote that, he had Francis Neuman in mind. The Talmud tells us that once in every person's life, for some maybe a few times more, they granted the gift of prophecy. And that gift of prophecy is granted at the choice of naming your child. And I believe that Francis Neuman's parents truly had the gift of prophecy when they named her in her Yiddish name, Zissel Fredel, which the two words mean Zissel. For anyone that knows her knows Zissel is sweet. She was a kind-hearted, benevolent, and generous Zissel. She was truly a sweet, sweet human being. While they might have named her after some grandmother or great-grandmother, but they truly, truly captured her identity. And then her second name is Fredel. And what does Fredel mean? Joy and happy. And while her early life was a life of absolute hell, her youth was robbed from her, and she had every excuse to live a bitter and an angry and a difficult life. But she chose to rise above that and to bestow on everyone that she knew simcha and freud and joy and happiness. And I will conclude. The Mishnah tells us that there are 3 crowns that one should search for. Shloisha Kesarim Haim. There are 3 crowns that one can try to reach. The first crown, Kesed Torah, the crown of a God-fearing and a committed Jew. Frances and her husband have truly, truly been Kesed Torah awardees. They've lived a proud Yiddish life. They have truly, truly lived an exemplary life of someone who's proud to be called a Yid, someone who's proud of what Yiddishkeit stands for, unbashfully. In our shul, we embarked upon a building project a few years ago, and I showed Francis the picture of our front building that we planned to build. And in the front of the building, there was going to be a big menorah. And to be honest, I was a little bit uncomfortable with this steching in the Egen, this absolute announcement in front of the main street at Crescent Road on Cherry Hill, a big menorah that's 40 feet wide. And when I showed it to Francis, the nachas and the joy that she had, the Yiddish Stolzkeit, the pride of Yiddishkeit, Kesset, she truly lived up to that. Emesa Yiddish mama, a true Jewish mother who was proud of everything that the Torah lived for. The second crown is the crown of Kahuna, the crown of leadership. And again, she had every right and justification to shy away from any responsibilities. She had a difficult beginning. Let her live a peaceful and a quiet life. But that wasn't Francis. She wasn't the kind of person who just shied away from responsibility and shrugged off any opportunity to lead. I can tell you, anytime she came to shul, every time she came to shul, she'd walk over to myself after davening and compliment me on my drasha every single time. Now you know that there's never a rabbi that hits a home run every single time. But in France, why, am I wrong? Okay, present company excluded, I'm sorry. But you say he gives a great sermon. Okay, your congregants disagree with me. In South Jersey, there's no rabbi that hits a home run every single time. But there was never a time that she didn't walk over to me and make me feel special and good. And then she would stay at the Kiddush. And though my wife prepares the Kiddush, I can tell you they're not always the best. She tries the hardest. But Frances would always make us feel special. She'd always rise and elevate and inspire. Kesa Kahuna, she truly rose the crown of leadership in a great way. But the one more than anything, Kesa Shem Tov Ela Al Gabeim, the crown of a good name, sits on top of both of those. I don't know a single person who ever said a bad word about Francis Neuman, to me or to anybody. Art, last night I said that to you, and if you remember, you made a face. And my reaction was, why, do you know otherwise? And your reaction was, no, absolutely not. You're right. Is that not what happened? Her name, her good name, will carry through La'il Me'elamim for years and years to come. But to her children and her grandchildren, I would just like to say one word. Frances, in the last few weeks, was very weak. And it was difficult for her. And even when my wife and I or others came to visit, it was hard for her to talk. But there was one time that I heard her talk, as I've heard her talk 20 years ago, with strength and energy. It was when she got onto the phone to her grandchildren and she begged them to continue with their cheres with honor to their mother. To her, family mattered more than anything else. So I bless you all, that you should continue on her legacy of derech eretz, of kindness and generosity and love. I've been a better person. My family is a better person. Our community, and I believe the world, is a better person. Today is a dark place for the rest of the world. But may her memory continue to be for a blessing, and may you continue to be a source of nachas for her. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Mendy. They say that we should always quote someone b'shem omro, so in Francis's name we will call you Rabbi Mendy.
Thank you.
And it really does mean so much for you to travel here today to be with the family and to give kavod, to give honor, love, tribute, and praise to Francis. Generous, selfless, and caring, always ready to help, giving, supporting so many. Her life had its challenges. A child survivor, she always remained so strong, often would reminisce about growing up in her hometown of Klobus, Poland, especially when the siblings were together. Very smart, with a great sense of humor. She never forgot a joke. For her, family was everything. In speaking with her brother Art, sister in love, Rose, they emphasized how close the family was, inseparable. You raised each other. And with the marriages of all four of the children, the three sisters and the brother and their spouses, you were like one big family. You traveled together, you had kids at the same time, and you raised them each, all as one. From Klobus to the Chensikov ghetto to the camps, the family stayed together as tight as it could. Frances was the youngest, the baby. Her older sisters would give her high heels so she'd appear taller in the lineups. Since the war started, when she was only 8 years old, they tried to protect her as best they could, always putting her at the back of the line, and when there wasn't enough food, they would give her theirs. The girls were all together in the camp, and Art told me that her sister Esther once stole a potato to give to her baby sister Frances, but Esther was caught, her hair cut off, given lashes, but she would do anything for her sister Frances, as they all would. When the war was over, miraculously, all four children survived, their young parents murdered by the Nazis. They survived and they found each other. At the children's camp, UNRWA, the older girls, Anne and Esther, were married off, and Art and his babysitter, Sister Frances, traveled together, trying to get to Israel. But while filling out the paperwork, they heard that their grandmother had a sister who lived in America. They sponsored Frances and Art, and they traveled together by boat to America. From New York, they quickly made their way to Cleveland to be with family. Art looked after Frances. He was 18 and made sure that Frances graduated, went to school, and she did graduate from Heights High, quickly adapting to America, becoming a beautician, as Rabbi Mendy said. With not much money, beauty school cost $200. Art made a deal with their Uncle Sam, that if he'd put up the money, Art would pay his uncle back $5 a week. Frances cut hair at Higbee's downtown. She loved cutting hair, and all of her clients loved her. When she met her beloved Stanley, it was truly an amazing pair. They were meant for each other, both selfless, both supporting so many. Stanley was also very family-oriented, a Marmisher who bought the land for Green Road Synagogue. They were both extremely caring and philanthropic. I know that Art had the opportunity to go to New Jersey these last few weeks to be by his sister's bedside. Frances would wake him up in the middle of the night just so that they could be together, to talk, to reminisce, to hold her hand, to be that one family back together again. And I know how important that was. In this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, our patriarch Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, has a vision, and he sees a ladder ascending all the way to the sky. And there the Torah says that the malachim, the angels, olim v'yordim bo, that the angels were going up the ladder and down the ladder. The rabbis have a problem with this. They say, shouldn't the angels be coming down first and then coming up if they started in heaven? But our tradition answers that we already have angels in our midst. Frances was one of those angels, a do-gooder, great, generous, kind, and loving. And now she has ascended that ladder to heaven, joining her beloved Stanley, her sister Esther, her parents Liba and Mordechai. May her name always bring blessings. Amen. Now I'd like to call upon Francis's son Phil for a family tribute.
First of all, I can't believe you told the Martin Neuman story.
Why not?
His 2 kids are here, so, but they know the story. I was asked to announce that today, after the cemetery, we will be sitting Shiva at, where is it, the Four Seasons, Building 3, 26600 George Zeiger Drive. We will be there today and tonight and sit Shiva with my uncle, and then we go back to New Jersey and sit Shiva there. Thursday, Gelbarts will receive at apartment 906, Four Seasons, 26600 George Zeiger Drive. Thursday from 1 to 4 and 7 to 9, and then Friday 1 to 4. They will sit Sunday 1 to 4 and 7 to 9, and Monday 1 to 4 and 7 to 9. So that's the official stuff. As some of you know, I worked in the radio business for some 36 years. First thing I ever got paid for was at Kent State University, the riots in 1970, which you guys read about in the history books. I had no problem with being on the radio and talking to people at games, but this is a lot different. This is personal, and it's tough for me, so please bear with me. My mother told Libby and me not to cry over her, so I don't plan on making anyone cry, but I hope I'll make a few people smile with some good memories. Frances Neuman was a survivor, literally and figuratively a survivor. We know she survived after being in the camps, and she survived a long time after her surgery this year. If you look up the word unselfish in the dictionary, and for those millennials, a dictionary was we did before Google was around. If you look up unselfish in the dictionary, it will say generous, noble, and charitable. And Frances Neuman was all of that. An unselfish person is someone who thinks about what is good for others as opposed to what is good for them. And she just did that when she came out of the hospital. She did not tell Libby, she did not tell me what really happened until after Tali and Eric's wedding, which she was here for. She would not do anything to spoil a simcha. So we did not know for a while. We knew the heart valve surgery was successful. What we did not know was that when they did the heart surgery, they discovered ovarian cancer. At the age of 87, she did not want to have surgery. She did not want to do chemotherapy. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. All she wanted was pain management. Make sure she wasn't in pain, and they did that so she wasn't hurting physically. Some of the nurses told us back in mid-September that she only had 2 weeks to live. But they did not know Frances Neuman. She was a fighter. Despite the fact she said she was ready to go and be with my father, her fighting heart kept her going until mid-November. Her live-in caretaker said she was trying to last until November 15th because that was the day my father died, on November 15th. She almost made it. The problem for us was that she did not want anyone to know, even her own brother. We were sworn to secrecy with real swear words, and we could not tell anybody. There was an old expression when I was growing up, probably not politically correct these days, but the old expression was that behind every great man, there was a great woman. That's not PC right now. The women have to stand right with the men. Nobody walks behind. But that's what it was. That's what it was. They were a team. They really were. In the early years, as was mentioned, she would work weekends at Higbee's in the old May Company as a hairdresser. According to legend, my father would take me to what was then Lefton's and now Jack's Deli, and he would make me eat 2 eggs every day, which is why I've hated eggs ever since. When things got better and my dad was building homes, she would be there to decorate the models. She had impeccable taste. But she was not just someone who was a decorator. My father came to her to talk over everything, business or otherwise. They were a team, and a pretty good one at that. After my dad died in 2002, my Aunt Esther finally convinced my mother that she needed to go out and talk at schools. It was her mother's wish that her children tell the world what Hitler did to us. It was not something she did easily. It drained her, but she spoke to the kids. Jewish kids, non-Jewish kids, elementary school, high school, wherever she was asked, she would go. Now there's one less person to testify and to pass things along. I would like to think that both my parents will be looking down from heaven today on what we do. Then again, they may be too busy playing a coppage with Aunt Esther and Uncle Herman. Who knows? It's going to be tough to go on without having any of our parents here, but we do what we have to do. Goodbye, Mom. We love you.
Please rise. El male rachamim shochein b'meromim hametzei menucha nechonam tachad kanvei hashechina b'mahalot kedoshim etorim כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת זה סופרי רבא מרדכי וליבה שלך לעולמם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. אנא בעל אז תראה בסדק נפך לעולמים וצרור בצורך חיים ונשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר